Oh, hello there. It is I, Kieran of Nintendad. Thank you for joining me on this most auspicious of days as we talk about the Nintendo Switch Pro. Oh, I hate that name. The Nintendo Switch Pro. Just doesn't sound right. Anyway, before we begin, this is a Nintendo Switch. It's my Nintendo Switch, Kieran of Nintendad. These are Joy-Con controllers. Always Joy-Con, never Joy-Cons or Joys-Cons. Why the fuck would you call it Joys-Cons? Never Joyrider, Joystick, Flowrider or Lowrider, Night Rider, the Night's Watch, and certainly not King in the North. Joy-Con, always Joy-Con. Capital J-O-Y dash capital C-O-N, Joy-Con. This is a Pro controller. This is also a Pro controller. And this is also a Pro controller. They're my Pro controllers, Kieran of Nintendad. Now, it's my birthday. I'll be 34 years old, and my mother asks me in March next year, what would I like for my birthday? I say, Mother, I'm 34 years old, you don't need to buy me a birthday present. She says, no, I'd like to. I say, well, okay then. I would like a Nintendo Switch and a controller. And so she goes into the store, and she sees the Nintendo Switch Pro, and she says, oh, I don't want that, that's some box. And he said a Nintendo Switch. And the controller, and she has a look, and she picks up just a plain black iteration of this. I can't find my own. And she goes, oh no, not this. This is the Pro controller. This is the Pro controller. He wanted the controller and he didn't want the Nintendo Switch Pro, so now my mother's confused. Are you happy, Nintendo? You confused my mother. So they can't call it the Nintendo Switch Pro. It would be too confusing, and maybe it would shift Pro controllers. Maybe it would. Maybe they're not selling enough Pro controllers and the directors of the board are like, hey, Nintendo, shift some more Pro controllers. We've got too many sitting in those warehouses. We need to empty the warehouses for Nintendo Switch Pros. God, this is hurting my head. Let's not beat our meat around the bush anymore. The reason we're here, so they bring out the Nintendo Switch Pro, and they don't want to call it the Nintendo Switch Pro because it sounds stupid. So they're like, what should we call it? Now, the first home Nintendo console was called the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was the NES. This is the Nintendo Switch, and if you've ever got a press release or anything else that might have it on, like a review code or thinking about layman terms, NS, Nintendo Switch, that's what it's shortened to. So you've got the Nintendo Entertainment System, and then you've got the Nintendo Switch, NS, okay? So after the Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo released the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and that was the SNES. So they could call their next console the Super Nintendo Switch, and then it would be the SNES, and that would be lovely. Then after that there was the Nintendo 64, and that was the N64. So it wouldn't really make much sense, but 3 more years down the line, if they wanted to bring out another model, they could call it the Super Nintendo 64 Switch. No, that's not what they want to call it at all. The Nintendo Switch 64, so it would be the NS 64. And then after the Nintendo 64 there was the Nintendo GameCube, the GC, so that would be the NSGOAT. And then you get onto the Wii and the Wii U and things start to get muddy, so confusing, backwards, wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. It all got a bit confusing there. And then of course you'd get to the Nintendo Switch, so you'd have the NSNS. Or the NS squared. I'm sorry, I just rebooted. So Nintendo, to break it down, the Nintendo Switch is the kind of culmination of all the work Nintendo's done in the past. Yeah, they've found their niche with this kind of model, this handheld hybrid. You can pop it in your dock and it appears on the TV. You can't see that because the camera's on me, but it did. And if not, it's in the dock, and that's great. And they found that, so I'd say they want to stick with a hybrid formula because it sells, it's printing money. The most recent fiscals have shown that the Nintendo Switch and its associated software is just doing wonderful stuff. So long may it continue, and a reboot of sorts would be great for the branding, because yeah, it's a handheld. I mean, this is a Nintendo Switch Lite, which is predominantly a handheld. You know, you can't put that in your dock. It doesn't fit. So it has no screen output kind of settings in there. It's just a handheld. So there is talk that the Nintendo Switch Pro could just be a box, but I don't think so. But then what do I know, really? I think that we'll see something in the new year, and I think a Nintendo Switch Pro is just not a nice name. I think, you know, there's a lot of talk on the internet that there's the Nintendo Switch Advance, which would play with the Game Boy Advance and the kind of handheld thing I was speaking about earlier. That would be kind of cool. I wouldn't be against that. I just think the Super Nintendo Switch is just like really cool. And I think if they are staying with their hybrid formula for a bit and they're releasing more powerful versions, kind of like Apple do with their horrible things, then I think that we'll see more of that in the future. And you know, Jesus Christ, look at that. See that? This thing's falling apart. And I believe that, you know, with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series XS, the rival companies are producing big, powerful, fast machines, and I don't think Nintendo will go down that route because it won't work for them. They've got a great supplementary device if you want a console like that, and you know, you want to play Nintendo games, which you do because they're dope. So, you know, these are my thoughts on the Nintendo Switch Advance, or the Super Nintendo Switch, or whatever else you want to call it. Just not the Switch Pro because it sounds shit. Yeah, right. I am Kieran of Nintendad. It's on my shirt, and I am off with my ring con to do some fucking exercise. Peace.